I'm like, no, that's not right. Like, you could literally wake up tomorrow and have Tourette's. Try it, like, particularly, even if you do have Tourette's, try and not just assume that like your experience of Tourette's is the same as other people's. Just like I'd encourage people without Tourette's to not assume that everybody with Tourette's has the same experience. It's weird. Tourette's is weird.
Tourette's is weird.
Basically, the summary, like the take-home point of this video is Tourette's is weird. If I didn't have Tourette's, I probably wouldn't be doing this PhD. Like, I have no idea where I would be. I don't know what I would be doing as a career.
What is human geography, and what does that have to do with Tourette's? And what is it like to research Tourette's if you also have that disorder? For all of that and more, keep watching. Welcome to Boneitch, and welcome to the series How We Tic, in which we meet people with some relation to Tourette's from all over the world. If you want to be a part of the series, check out the email address in the description. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to meet you. If you are new here and you want to learn more about Tourette's, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Please subscribe. That really helps me out a lot. And if you click that notification bell, you'll get notified when a new video is coming up. All right, let's meet Daniel. Let's do this. Can you maybe like introduce yourself for everyone?
Yeah, so I'm Daniel, I'm 24 and I'm currently a PhD researcher at Newcastle University in the UK, and I'm studying human geography. So my research looks into the lived experiences of people with Tourette's syndrome, such as myself. And I also kind of think about accessibility of public spaces and all things disability studies, I suppose. Yeah, so I was diagnosed with Tourette's back in 2009, although I guess my kind of relationship or my understanding of like my own body in Tourette's as a whole was kind of strange because I wasn't fully aware of my actual official diagnosis for quite a while. But yeah, makes for a very interesting story.
I'm really curious to hear about that. That's hey. So like human geography, what does that mean?
Oh. There's like an ongoing joke that geography is just the study of anything you want. Just put geographies of and then anything and you can call it geography. But yeah, like broadly speaking, it can be anything from like kind of population studies to studying like economics or international development, or even kind of like art and philosophy. So my kind of focus is, I guess it's more easily described as like sociology in my case. So it's kind of like a mixture between sociology, a bit of politics, and a little bit of philosophy as well. So just thinking about the body in like very arty-farty ways, I suppose.
That's really cool. So, and you combine that somehow with Tourette's. So that's a Tourette's story as well. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess when I was doing my master's in geography, we were doing all these classes about like the human body and how it interacts with space and all these kind of like different philosophical trains of thought, I suppose, about the body in public spaces. And I was getting frustrated because as somebody with Tourette's, none of the theories made any sense to me, because they all kind of came from this place of assuming that everybody has full control over their own bodies. It was almost like they were kind of describing the way that people move through spaces as like choreographed, like dance. But obviously with Tourette's, that's not always the case. Like I don't plan to twitch or yell or make strange noises. So yeah, it was just it just kind of got quite frustrating for me that I didn't feel like people with Tourette's were being represented in like academic texts. So yeah, I decided to do my master's dissertation on it, and then a few years later, and I'm here doing a PhD, kind of developing it further, and kind of trying to find some kind of theory that makes sense. So I'm trying to make a theory, I suppose, which all sounds very scary now. I kind of say that out loud.
I think that's good. I mean, that always that surprises me. Maybe it's just because I like you have neurotypical, and then the opposite would be, I think, me. I think that's okay. But the idea, I mean, I understand it from like an academic, like that the assumption that people have control over their body, because if you don't have that, then what do you have?
Oh,
but
yeah.
I can't imagine that people actually always have full control over themselves or over their body, even if they don't have Tourette's.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, and actually that's kind of something I think about in like my research. So rather than just saying, here is something that makes sense for Tourette's, I'm kind of saying, if we consider Tourette's when we're doing this research, it kind of highlights other things as well for people who are neurotypical. So the working title of my PhD research project is called Geographies of Impulse. So I'm looking at this idea of impulsivity and kind of acting before you can think and things like that. So obviously that can kind of be applied to anyone. Like, let's say a dog comes up to you and tries to bite you. You're not just going to stand there and think, what do I do? Like, naturally you're going to move out the way, right? And I guess that's impulse rather than something that's like reflective. So I guess, that's what I'm trying to do as well. Try and make links and show why it's important to think about Tourette's in that kind of context.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think we can learn so much from, if you look at like the extremes, or like, maybe like the extremes in a theory, and then use that to see like, but maybe that says a lot about people who are not on that extreme, but more in the center, and maybe we can think differently about stuff. I think that's really interesting. Really cool. So I can imagine that doing research about stuff about Tourette's while you have Tourette's yourself can be an interesting dynamic to deal with. So what are some of the best and the worst parts of that?
I think this kind of goes for any kind of research project where you're basing your research off of your own lived experiences. But like specifically with Tourette's, like obviously researching Tourette's, I meet a lot of people with Tourette's, and we have like discussions and we do focus groups and things like that. So I guess the most obvious one is like this idea that people's tics can trigger other people's tics. So like I remember it was really funny, when I was doing my master's research, we were sat in a room doing this focus group and just having this great discussion about like attitudes towards Tourette's generally in society. And it's just funny. It's like a little domino effect. One person tics and then another and then another. And it's just like constantly going all over the place. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like the effect of that on research, like obviously it means my research is a lot more physically tiring, I think, sometimes. And I think sometimes like some of the stories that you hear as well, like they can be quite triggering and quite upsetting and like emotionally heavy. But yeah, like although it's a lot of like extra hidden labor, I suppose, in terms of doing research about Tourette's when you have Tourette's, I think it's something that is needed. Like, I think that's where lots of the issues within academia and like academic research come from, is because it's not people, it's like generally in terms of like disability studies, it's a lot of the time it's not people with said disability or neurodiversity that is actually researching it. And so there's no kind of like nuance or like, first-hand experience of the thing that they're researching, which ends up in things being like massively misinformed and like inaccurate. And so I think it is really important to have people, in this case with Tourette's, doing research about Tourette's. And I know there are a few people actually at different universities, at least within the UK, with Tourette's kind of doing a similar thing. So that's really nice to see. But yeah, generally I think it's really nice as well. So obviously there's all this kind of like extra labor and extra work and it's more tiring. But on the other hand, it's really rewarding because I get to meet so many people with Tourette's. And I hadn't met anyone with Tourette's until I was like 21, I think. No, yeah, like 20 or 21, despite the fact that I got diagnosed when I was like 13, I think it was. Because like I think when I was growing up with Tourette's, I found it quite isolating, it's quite lonely because you don't tend to, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know many people who kind of grew up, at least who are kind of like maybe like my kind of age, like 24, many people with Tourette's who grew up with like a solid group or community of people with Tourette's around them. So yeah, it's just really nice to kind of meet other people and to meet like a range of like such a diverse group of people with Tourette's. So like I've just made some great friends through my research as well, which is always nice, always a positive thing.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, I agree with that. I mean, for me, like meeting people with Tourette's and finding that community really helped. Just accepting my own Tourette's as well. Like I had I could be really mean to myself when it came to my tics and feeling like I should, not bother anyone with them, but just being around other people with Tourette's and finding that community really helped. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Did you find yourself like, I don't know, like at high school kind of thing, like suppressing your tics as much as possible then as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But oh, there's an ambulance coming by. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I had tics when I was young. I really suppressed them, but they weren't that bad either. So yeah, they were easier to suppress, but I definitely suppressed them. And then at home, I would kind of tic, but I would also suppress them at home. Yeah. But I had no idea that it was Tourette's and that was something that was going on. So yeah, definitely. And even when I got older and my tics got worse, and I think my tics definitely got worse when I started working 40 hours a week, and starting testosterone, I think, really influenced it as well.
Yeah.
And not being able to hold them in anymore, and then feeling like, oh no, I'm weird and I'm different. And then, of course, like finding other people with it and just feeling comfortable around a group of people to just let it out. That was,
nice.
Really cool.
No, I found the same. It's nice to not feel like, I don't know, like even like amongst people who don't have Tourette's now, like because I have met people with Tourette's and I have kind of seen other people ticking in public and like ticking when I'm having conversations with them. Like I don't really feel as much need anymore to suppress as much. Obviously there's some situations where I still suppress things because it would just cause more trouble than it's worth in some instances. But yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it gives so much more just like relaxation and just not worrying about like every single tic and every person. And yeah, absolutely worth it. Because you told me you were also quite active now in the like Tourette's community, like with Tourette's Action and things like that.
Yeah, so I kind of started getting involved again around the same kind of time I was doing my master's. So that was like 2017 or 2018, like that kind of academic year. Obviously, I kind of decided that I wanted to do this research based on Tourette's. And so I thought to myself, I was like, right, now I really need to get plugged in to this community. I can't just kind of sit on the sidelines anymore. Like if I'm going to do this research, I need to not just base everything off of my own experience, because that's where half of the issues came from before. So I kind of got plugged in. I joined a bunch of like Facebook forums, and I was getting, basically me and a few other people were getting increasingly frustrated about the fact that there weren't any like adult only like Tourette's groups that we were aware of. Everything was like people's parents. And obviously like whilst it's important for those parents and like friends and family members of people with Tourette's to have that space to chat, it wasn't necessarily like a safe space for people with Tourette's. And like you get sometimes, I won't say any names of groups, but sometimes you get people like filming their children ticking and saying, oh, this new tic of my daughter's or my son's is really frustrating. And everyone who actually has Tourette's is sat there like, what are you doing? Stop filming your child ticking. But yeah, so basically after a while in those groups, a few of us got quite frustrated with that. And then we found out there were like a bunch of like kind of international groups for adults with Tourette's, but nothing specifically for UK adults. So we set one up. So that was like maybe at the end of 2017. And then, yeah, from then on, we've had like a little kind of private Facebook forum, like a little safe space for people who are over 18 with Tourette's. So we can talk about anything we want without worrying about like the age of people or whether there's going to be like parents of people with Tourette's in those groups to kind of share their opinions, which aren't always helpful. Like obviously the best intentions are always there, but I think it is really important to have those safe spaces. And yeah, as a result, like it's been really nice, like the kind of sense of community that has been built. So I helped to facilitate this UK specific group for adults with Tourette's with 2 other amazing women. And yeah, it's just great. Like we managed to organize like socials and things, and obviously not at the moment with the pandemic and everything going on, but like we would sometimes do kind of like meetups in London, and yeah, it would just be a funny time. Obviously when you get a bunch of people with Tourette's together, it can be interesting, but yeah, it's nice. It kind of makes you feel more comfortable ticking in things, and yeah, it's just really rewarding. And I think we've had lots of feedback with people saying, like lots of these people as well have had adult onset Tourette's syndrome, and because that's so underrepresented, like even on like charitable websites, it says things like Tourette's is a childhood onset condition, which it can be, yes, but it's not necessarily. But obviously, because like people who have adult onset are left out of this narrative, I think they do feel left out a lot of the time. So I think, yeah, from kind of feedback we've had, it's been really nice for these people with adult onset Tourette's to kind of be able to be plugged into like a community of people with Tourette's, and yeah, just kind of seek support and I guess just meet people who are going through similar things. But yeah, I guess that's kind of how I got involved in all of that tourettic community shenanigans, I suppose.
Well, it is shenanigan. I mean, getting, like you said, people with Tourette's together, it's a lot of fun, but it's
very
intense.
tiring.
Yeah.
I think it's also hard to kind of warn people who even do have Tourette's, who haven't met people with Tourette's, what it's going to be like sometimes. I know the first time I met someone with Tourette's, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm picking up so many new tics.
Yeah.
It was quite scary, if I'm honest. But yeah, good in the long run. It
is worth it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really tiring. That's true. And I will sometimes pick up tics from those meetups, but they usually go away. They never stay as intense as they are in that day. You just get really tired and you sleep it off, and then you're fine. But you'll meet great people, and that are just the same. You don't have to hold anything in, and you can laugh with them. But yeah, they just see. You can have like show all your tics, and they still see the person behind the tics because they're the same, and you just connect through it, and that's a lovely thing to experience. I think I don't know. I always recommend when people say, I think I just got diagnosed and I don't know anyone. I always recommend try and find a group or go to a meetup, because it's so. It was such a positive experience for me. Yeah. And the Tourette community is just so fun. I think it's there's such cool people and very creative and
definitely lots of creative people. I don't know why. I don't know what that is, but yeah, I just find a lot of people with Tourette's tend to be super creative, which is very also selfishly is beneficial for me in my research, because I use art as a method. So it's really nice to see that. But yeah, no, it's really cool to kind of see everyone's creative outputs, like within our kind of UK adults with Tourette's group, we have these we have painters, we have musicians and poets and spoken word artists and photographers, and yeah, it's just really cool to kind of see their representation of how they experience or how they see the world. I don't know, I think some of the best art that I've seen and some of the best music that I've heard comes from people with Tourette's, definitely.
I think so.
That's not just me being biased because I have Tourette's, obviously, but
yeah, maybe a little, because that's the people you've been in contact with, but I think we're allowed to say that. I think that's it's my channel, so we're allowed to say that. Oh wow. Yeah, as someone who researches Tourette's and of course has had to read a lot of old research, all the other research about Tourette, and I know kind of the discourse about it. What is something that you wish other researchers or other professionals in the field just kind of got better? What is that thing that just kind of frustrates you when you read an abstract and you think, oh no, not again?
Oh gosh, where do I begin? There's so many things I could list off. I think, again, one of the main things is this idea that Tourette's is a childhood onset thing only. I'm like, no, that's not right. Like, you could literally wake up tomorrow and have Tourette's. Like, it happens. And there won't necessarily be a specific reason or a specific thing that might have triggered it that's obvious. Like, and I think, yeah, there's a lot of consideration of, like I said, adulthood onset that is just kind of disregarded within kind of discourse and like research surrounding Tourette's. But also, I think in terms of what I would say specifically to researchers and to researchers who are interested in Tourette's, is that it's all well and good trying to, you know, fight for like this awareness and accurate representation. But if you're not including actual like Tourettic voices, you should, like, I personally believe you shouldn't be researching it. Like, you're within geography, at least, there's a lot of there's like a way of kind of doing research that's called participatory action research. And the way it kind of works is that your participants will have a massive say in how your research project is designed. And they will be some of the people trying to, like, you know, they will have some kind of power, and they'll almost be like equals to you as a researcher. So it's not just you trying to get what you want from them. It's like a collaborative effort. And I think when it comes to Tourette's, especially because of all the misrepresentation that has happened, I think that's so important to try and prioritize or try and do research in that way if it is possible. Obviously, it's a bit harder at the moment. Yeah, I think that's really important, because then you get real life stories of people with Tourette's about what it is like to live with Tourette's, rather than people kind of looking from the outside and saying, oh, this looks really, really hard, or kind of, I don't know. I feel like it kind of sometimes results in a bit of like a victim mindset, not mindset, but like an approach that, I don't know how to word it, but almost like able-bodied researchers look at people with Tourette's, and when they're writing about them, they're always like, oh, they're so brave. They're so amazing and inspiring. And actually, do you know what? Half the stuff I do is not inspiring. Like, I'm just trying to get through life, you know, plodding along through, struggling through, especially in this pandemic at the moment, just like everyone else, you know. And I think, yeah, it's just, if you considered people's voices and people who have Tourette's, and you implement their voices and you try and platform what they want to say rather than what you want to say, these sorts of things will stop being an issue. So yes, that's a very long-winded way of saying basically researchers stop assuming things and actually include Tourettic participants.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think that the autism community has, I'm probably remembering this wrong, what is it? Nothing about us without us, something like that. So in the media and stuff like that, I don't.
I think there was that hashtag, wasn't it? It's like hashtag actually autistic or something.
Yeah, so like with the Sia movie and things like that. That people making stuff about autistic people that are not, like, no actually autistic person was actually ever included in it, and it just becomes this. Look at this poor child and their poor parents. And
I think they're about the same film at the moment, a very recent one.
Yeah, it has a melody too. I don't know, like music.
Yes, that's the one. That's the one.
Yeah,
nominated for a couple of Golden Globes, undeservingly, in my opinion. But you know, we'll not go into all the details.
Yeah. Well, I mean, J.K. Rowling was nominated for her essay thing, which was her anti-trans essay. So I'm not surprised. That's not the thing.
It's not good enough.
Yeah. No, but I agree. Yeah, like include people that actually live with something in your research, or in your art, or in, like, if you want to write. I've had comments, people that say that they're writing a screenplay or a story in which one of the characters has Tourette's.
Yeah.
Well, like, first of all, do your research and maybe like include people with Tourette's to read it and to be a part of it, and not use the standard tropes, because we've all seen it.
Sure.
And
because it's just important to not be lazy in that sense. I think when you're trying to include people with Tourette's in, like, let's say, like, your kind of like films or stories and things, like, it is so important to even just kind of get somebody with Tourette's to consult. And not even just one person, like try and get a bunch of people, because everybody's experience is completely different. Like, again, there's a lot of this assumption that people with Tourette's are always swearing, but that's not that many people with Tourette's actually swear, but that's the only representation we see, because I guess it's considered the most entertaining and the most like shocking. So then people want to watch it, but actually like Tourette's can be like, it can be like a very mundane thing as well. Like it can literally just be like a shoulder shrug like that, you know, like it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be yelling obscenities and sticking your middle finger up at people and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it can be quite an invisible thing. And I also think that there are many people that have Tourette's that don't realize it, but that are just so used to suppressing these like kind of invisible tics and get really tired and just feel like there's something wrong with them, because all they know about Tourette's is the cursing and that. And then even with the coprolalia, with the cursing and stuff like that, how that stuff is represented is also not the way it is. It's not because you want to say something, and because it's, cockatoo. Uh-oh. So you mentioned when you introduced yourself that your Tourette story, like your personal Tourette story, was quite interesting.
Yes. So I was diagnosed in 2009, but I didn't actually realize I had an official diagnosis for like 7 or 8 years after. Like, because I kind of knew I had Tourette's. Like, I kind of just assumed that's what it was. Like, obviously, when I was in these meetings, like, and in these doctor's appointments, I was listening. Like, I knew I had Tourette's, but I never saw an official diagnosis. The only kind of thing I heard was, oh, he might have Tourette's, and that's it. Like, that's all I kind of like held on to. So when I was growing up, like, I kind of didn't want to just say, oh, I have Tourette's, because I didn't know if I actually did. I'd never seen any kind of official diagnosis. So when people were asking me why I was making silly noises or just being disruptive in class at high school, for example, I'd just have to be like, oh, I've got a cough, or, oh, sorry, I was laughing at a joke that someone said, even if I wasn't, and things like that. Like, I didn't want to say, oh, sorry, I have Tourette's, because I didn't, it sounds ridiculous. Like, I knew I had Tourette's, but I didn't know it was like officially Tourette's, if that makes sense. I was like, maybe it's like some other kind of tic disorder, or maybe I just have tics and it will like disappear and I don't need to worry about it. But yeah, it was only actually like towards the end of my undergrad degree that I even realized I had an official diagnosis, which is ridiculous. Like, how did I not know? But hey, that's fine. So yeah, it just kind of meant that I just had a bit of a strange kind of experience as a teenager with Tourette's, knowing he kind of knowing he had Tourette's, but not knowing 100%. Yeah. So basically, I just felt the need to suppress, and I guess it's because like I didn't know that much about Tourette's. Like, I just assumed it was all the swearing, which I never kind of had as like a child or as a teenager.
Yeah. No. Oh, I can relate to that. That was. Oh no. Yeah, because I got like, you know, like kind of, because I got diagnosed with a lot of stuff when I was a teenager, because I was just not really very functional. Like, one of the many, it was kind of like suggested, oh, you might also have Tourette's, and I was just like, nah, that's not real. Sure. And it just got pushed to the back of my mind. And then my tics got a lot worse, but not having like a word to actually say, okay, I have Tourette's, I'm allowed to claim this word or to claim this term. So when I went to a neurologist that was like specialized in Tourette's that I could trust, who was like known in the Netherlands for knowing a lot about Tourette's, and like within 5 minutes, you're like, why am I even giving a second opinion? You have Tourette's. I mean, come on. Like, and just having a conversation. So did you do this? Did you do that? No, but you can say that you have Tourette's. And I was just so happy just to have that word and be like, okay, it's not my fault. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost felt like a word I couldn't use. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's still a bit of like a taboo thing, isn't it? Like, it's the kind of thing where someone wouldn't be like, "Oh, do you have Tourette's?" It's like Tourette's is the word they say quietly. They're like, "Do you have Tourette's?"
Like the one word we say quietly. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not something you want to like call yourself unless you know that you have it, even though I don't know, it's a weird thing still to consider that you might actually have that. It's I think something it takes a while.
Yeah, I think it's weird as well because like I said, like growing up, to me Tourette's was swearing and sticking your middle finger up and things. Like I don't know. I did like, even when I did find out about my official diagnosis, I was a bit like, do I have Tourette's? Like, do I kind of like identify as somebody with Tourette's? Like, all I do is twitch a little bit. Lo and behold, it would get worse. But it was just very, very weird dynamic. And I think it was only really maybe like 2018. So like when I was finishing up my master's, that I started to kind of think about myself actually as someone with Tourette's, despite my diagnosis. And I think it's interesting because like there's a lot of like debate as well about whether people with Tourette's do you say that people with Tourette's are disabled? Do you say they're neurodiverse? Like how do you talk about people with Tourette's? So like even now I'm kind of like on this, I suppose, journey, as cringe as that sounds, like on a journey of trying to figure out like how I identify. And I think, I mean, going back to my research, like that's another thing, I guess, that's weird about researching Tourette's when you have Tourette's, is that I'm constantly reading all these theories about disability, and then I'll be like, oh yes, that makes me think I'm disabled. But then I'll read another thing and be like, oh no, that's not me. I'm not disabled. So like your kind of like identity is like constantly changing. It's constantly in flux, you know? So it's just really, it's such a strange thing, Tourette's, like not even just Tourette's itself, just kind of all the discussions around it, and very, very strange.
It is strange. Yeah. I think that's something that everyone with Tourette's can agree to. It's a weird thing. Like, doesn't matter how well you adjust to it and how well you start understanding your Tourette's and everything, or how much research you've done, it's still weird. Like,
yeah, especially because it's constantly changing as well. Like, you know, tics wax and wane, don't they? Like your tics are never identical. Well, I don't know about you, but like some people's tics are never the same, like each day. So then obviously your experience of Tourette's is constantly changing. So yeah, it's odd. Like if someone was to like describe to me, they'd be like, oh, describe your experience with Tourette's. I'd be like, oh my goodness, where do I begin? Like, it changes every day.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, because it's part of yourself, and it's your own brain, your own body that's doing it. But sometimes it feels like just like a separate entity that's just kind of. I mean, it's not really. I'm not like in a metaphysical sense or like a ghost, but it's like my Tourette does this and makes me do this. It like changes. Sharing your body.
Yeah, like sharing your body with some other thing, and you only have like a little bit of control. Well, you have most of the control, but there's a few bits where it's like having a naughty child that's like keeps pressing buttons on a laptop or something.
Yeah, like a conjoined twin, right?
Yes.
And the moment you start talking about it, it just starts acting up, because that even makes it worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. And then where do all these like words and sentences come from? Like, even if you understand like the neurology behind it, like, but why do I say top, shop, stop? I never thought that, but there it is.
It is interesting though, because like obviously like it's not, if people like, a common question is like when you have like a complex verbal tic that's like a sentence or something, like people often are like, oh, were you thinking that? And everyone replies saying, no, that wasn't what I was thinking. But actually like sometimes those tics do come from a place of like something triggering it. So I remember one of my participants was saying, this is for my master's, like that they had this tic once where like they saw a woman who was overweight, and then they were ticking like fat. And obviously like she was aware of what was causing that, but obviously she's not going to say, oh, sorry, like I'm thinking that, like, obviously sometimes these words come out of nowhere, right? But also there are instances where there are certain things that trigger it. Like, you might notice that, say, someone has like blonde hair, and you would just point and say, "Oh, blonde hair," like things like that. Like, I think it's not as, I think because people struggle to understand how like confusing and how varied, even like on a day-to-day basis, Tourette's is, it's just easier to say, no, like that, none of these things I say have ever come into my mind. But I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about, and I don't want to kind of push across this idea of, oh, everything I say that's a tic is something that I've thought, because that's not the case. For some people it might be, for some people it might not be. And I think that's something that's really important for people to know about Tourette's, is that it is like that different. Like, it's not just like a different experience and people have different tics. It's so different that like it can be like you can be triggered and say, oh, you've got blonde hair, or oh, you're overweight. But also you could just say something that is completely random that you have never thought of. Like, it is so different between each person. And I think people should know that.
Absolutely. Oh, I agree. Yeah. Like, and it's I think that the thing that where people go wrong is that sometimes people think that a verbal tic is just not having a filter. So it's just like your actual opinion, even though it's like I'd have like the oinking at police tic, and I only at police because I think there is a connection there, but it's not that every time I see police, I think that, and I just can't help myself but doing that. Or, you know, when I see a baby, I'll say horrible stuff about babies. It's not that I'm actually thinking that, but there is a baby, there's a connection, and then, I don't know, something happens. And even with, again, like how tics feel, like sometimes there's an urge, and sometimes it actually feels like you're just like twitching, like you just, I don't know, like sat on your arm too long and it just does something weird, and you have no control. And sometimes it's more like you want to scratch or something. It's more. Yeah,
it is. It's really interesting to think about. Like, I don't know, all of this difference like makes my research a pain in the bum, if I'm quite honest, because like I'll be asked, let's say I'm presenting at a conference, someone will say, oh, like how does a tic feel? And I'm like, I cannot answer that for you. Like, which tic are you talking about? Like, everyone feels different. They all come from different places. Like you're saying, like it might feel like, you know, when you're cold and you shiver and you don't think about it, you just do it. But then it might feel like, oh, I need to like move my shoulder. So, but you can't stop yourself from doing it. So it does come from all these different places. And I don't know. So it's weird. Tourette's is weird.
Tourette's is like, weird.
Basically, the summary, like the take-home point of this video is Tourette's is weird.
I think that's like the summary of my channel, is that Tourette's is weird. You know, starting this series to talk with different people to try and understand Tourette's better and have a more like broad understanding of Tourette's and amplify more Tourette's voices, and then the conclusion every time is just, Tourette's is so weird. Do you get it? I don't get it.
You like start doing research and like start thinking like, right, I'm going to really understand Tourette's. But then like the more research you do, the more it doesn't make sense. At least in my case anyway.
Yeah, no, but that's true. And that makes it fun as well. I mean, that's why I find it interesting. If it was like a clear-cut answer, like this is it. And I think that also makes it interesting because people are interested in Tourette's. There's a reason why these types of like videos or like anything like TikTok channels, why they are so popular, is that people are like kind of like fascinated by it. Like, what is it? And there is no like one answer, and it is kind of weird, and it's And I really hope that can like kind of like bend into becoming like people are. That will be better, like representation, better research about Tourette's as well. And that it's not just the entertainment part is fun, but that it will also like bring us to more like acceptance.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is interesting though, because obviously I find like there's a lot of young people, right, on social media at the moment, kind of like, especially teenagers who are getting such a big following, like on like TikTok or Instagram or Twitter or whatever. And like a lot of these people, like I don't want to say influencers, but like I don't like that term, but like a lot of people,
content creators.
Oh, there you go. That's a better term.
It's very neutral.
A lot of these tourettic content creators, you know, are like, they do have like coprolalia, right? And they do have like copropraxia and things. So it is this, I don't know, like the reason that their voices are so heard and they're so popular is because of this idea of it's entertaining. So like, it is a great thing that these people are getting more of a following and that they're using this following to kind of, you know, myth bust all these like misconceptions about Tourette's. But at the end of the day, like I couldn't name one kind of like well-known content creator with Tourette's who does not have coprolalia or does not like have something that is, you know, like more severe, for lack of better words. I think you don't often see that. It's like, it's just a weird dynamic. Like obviously you want people to get more attention because then they can raise more awareness, but then you don't want like just one singular narrative of Tourette's to be portrayed, which I do feel like a lot of the time is the case. And that's no one's fault in particular. You know, I won't go into, this is the classic geography thing. I was going to say like, oh, it's capitalism.
It's always capitalism.
You know? It's the way like the algorithms work. Like, you know, me twitching is not as entertaining as me like swearing at someone, you know, like that's just how it is. And like obviously like algorithms on social media are going to reward that and kind of boost those things up. It's just how it works, isn't it? So it's no like individual person's responsibility or fault, I suppose. But it's just interesting how it can, even like people raising awareness can unintentionally and like to some extent can't necessarily avoid the fact that these more kind of extreme cases of Tourette's are being portrayed more than like the kind of like more subtle cases. It's just interesting to think about. And maybe I'm over intellectualizing now.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, and there's I've seen some videos about from people with Tourette's about especially the Tourette's like cute TikTok girl compilation stuff like that and then they're all like just like coprolalia but they're teenage girls and oh my god, how novel. Which is I mean it's funny from like a YouTube algorithm perspective that those videos are doing well even though there's a lot of cursing in them, so that's already interesting, but then it goes to like another extreme. But of course it's not to blame like the people with Tourette's that are making those videos because it's very empowering, it's educational, it's and there's a whole like generation, and that makes me feel old, but a whole generation of teenagers that are really interested in learning about Tourette's and really know more about it than when I was a teenager and what my friends knew. And that's good. But so, I don't know. I sometimes like compare it to like the queer culture and like the representation that happened at first, like in like the 70s, 80s, that was always a bit more like flamboyant and over the top and like, oh, that's so novel, it's so weird, but we like it. And that became okay. And now it's just like, we actually understand it and it's normal. And I hope that we can actually, I think with the autism movement as well, that at first all we saw and were interested in about autism were people that were non-verbal, that were just on one extreme. And now there's just so much more representation about autism in general.
Yeah, definitely. I think even in academia as well, like within like geographies of disability and geographies of neurodiversity, there's like a lot of autistic scholars now, which is great because they're starting to kind of write all these like critiques of what we had always assumed as like really foundational, like obvious things within kind of geography. Tourette's isn't quite there yet. So I'm curious, maybe like it will kind of follow like a similar progression or something. I guess we'll see.
I hope so, yeah. I made a video about Seth Pressler who has severe coprolalia, and because of that wasn't allowed to go to university or to college anymore. And I had some comments on that video about people that were just getting out of school and were doubting that they should go to university, that they should study because they were just scared that, you know, that they could not do it, or that people would just judge them, or that they were not able to do it. I think that's a shame. So I'm really curious what you think about that.
I think, long story short, there is so much more support available for you in a university and like outside of school than there is in school, which sounds ridiculous. You would think it would be the other way around. Yeah, like obviously like, I didn't realize my official diagnosis, so I didn't realize what I could get. But you know, like in my undergrad, I qualified for like extra time and exams. Like they would record lectures if I'd asked, they would have recorded lectures for me if I couldn't go because I had a tic attack or something, or if I needed to leave because I felt I was being too disruptive or felt uncomfortable. I feel like, especially in like a university setting, people generally are a little bit more kind of, you know, like aware of the world around them. So obviously you're always going to get like a couple of people who have no idea and think Tourette's is funny until you explain it to them. But like people generally are more accepting, they're more understanding, they're more kind of eager to learn, you know, like I guess that might just come naturally with the fact that people are in a university setting are there to learn. Well, 9 times out of 10, they're there to learn. So like, yeah, I guess people are, I definitely found university a lot easier than kind of high school and like sixth form and things. But yeah, and I guess I've kind of like gone the other way and like instead of kind of saying like my Tourette's, well, I guess at first I felt like my Tourette's limited me, but now like my entire PhD is based on the fact that I have Tourette's. Like I wouldn't ethically be able to do this research if I did not have Tourette's. And actually like I'm really lucky that I was like awarded a studentship, so I'm like on like kind of like a salary for my PhD, and part of that is like, again, like I would not have been able to get that if I didn't have Tourette's, but I wanted to research Tourette's. Like it would have been a lot harder for me to get that. So I suppose I'm lucky in my case because it has somewhat benefited me. Yeah, like if I didn't have Tourette's, I probably wouldn't be doing this PhD. Like I have no idea where I would be. I don't know what I would be doing as a career, but I don't know. I just think, yeah, it's important to try and not let the fact that you have Tourette's stop you from going after what you want, you know. If you want to go to university and you're worried about your Tourette's, that's fine. Just make sure you make people aware. Obviously, you don't have to come out and tell everyone if you're not comfortable. Like, I'm not trying to force people to kind of come out as having Tourette's. But if you can find even like a small group or like a couple of people that you trust, maybe tell like your personal tutor or something as well. And definitely get in touch with like whatever university you're going to, like whatever university's welfare team is, where you're kind of looking to study. Like if you get in touch with them, they like are legally, at least in the UK, but I assume in most places, they're legally required to protect your information and not just share it with everyone, unless you consent to them doing that. I know like at the university I'm at, obviously I don't have any exams, but like I wouldn't have to, like I would have to, if I wanted to get extra time in an exam, for example, and I was eligible because of a disability, such as Tourette's, you know, it could be a host of other things. Like I would have to tell the wellbeing team so that they could sort it out, but no one would know why I was getting extra time. Like you can get extra time for a huge number of reasons, but unless I told them, like the examiners wouldn't know that that's the reason I'm getting extra time. Like, and in some cases they might not even, like the people marking it might not even be told you had extra time. I don't know. I just think there's a lot more support in like a university setting, and even in like the working world, I guess, like outside of education, there's a lot more support than there is in high school. At least that's what I found anyway. I don't know about you, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, university and work as well. I mean, I can imagine like coming out of school that you think, well, if this was the training, the training phase, then the rest is going to be horrible. But that's just, I don't know. Don't want to blame it on capitalism again, and that schools just don't have enough money, and that children are just mean and everything is scary.
Children are so mean. I used to work, like when I was at uni and undergrad, I was working in childcare with children with like special educational needs. And it would be so funny because they'd be like, "You're twitching." I'm like, "Yes." And they'd be like, "That looks silly." And I'm like children are so mean. They're the meanest people out there.
Yeah. And when you're old, it's funny because it's like, yeah, it's true. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But you're very small, so what are you going to do? But when you are that age, it's not that. Of course, it's a lot. But it gets, and it's so, I hate that because it gets better, but it does, and people stop caring that much anymore about what you're doing, and they become more interested in people outside of their own little experience. Yeah, I mean, people, when you are in university, they care about your brain and what you're doing, and not as much about like something very particular that's different. And there will be so many other people that are, you know, in some way neurodiverse or disabled, or there's so many people like that. And in work definitely. As well. Yeah. It's a shame to not try, and I understand that it's scary, but I think it's, And if it doesn't work, and if it's too much, then that's also fine. But
that's so fine. Like, but then no pressure to do it.
Yeah, but if you're like, you know, like my age, I mean, you can't go back. Because I didn't go for the PhD with the mindset of, I can always go back. And even though I'm only 30, I'm already like, I'm not going to do that now, because it's just.
See, I had 2 years off even between my master's and PhD, and I came back and I was like, I don't know how to write an essay anymore. But obviously, like, it is possible. You know, there are people that don't go to uni until, like, you know, they're in their 40s. Some people like 50s, 60s. You know, like, it's possible. That's a valid choice as well. But I think if university is something that you want to do, and like to do, like, soon, like, I don't know, just go for it if you can. I think at least in the UK, like, you don't, like, we're lucky enough that you don't really have to kind of pay because you get like student finance and things. So like you can, you know, drop out after a term if you absolutely hate it. Like I've had friends like who didn't have Tourette's or kind of any like disability or neurodiversity even who do that as well. You know, like I've had colleagues as well in the past who've done their like freshers week at uni and then dropped out because they're like, actually, I can't deal with uni, and that's fine, you know. And they go on to really successful, like to be successful people. So I think on one hand, whilst I would encourage you to kind of go for it with university, if whoever that was who commented is watching, like on one hand, I would encourage you to go for it. On the other hand, don't feel like it's the only way that you can have success, you know? Like there's not kind of like a one route or one kind of like perfect recipe for success, I suppose. And if you do drop out, that's not you failing, you know?
Absolutely. I think I studied for 10 years, maybe a bit 11 years, from 17 to when I started working, 60 something. I was a first year 4 times. I did English for 1 year in university, then singing, so conservative music.
Oh, cool.
Like classical singing, because I wanted to do opera, and I hate opera, so that made no sense. Then I did like arts and cultural sciences, what I actually did until my master's. Then I couldn't get a job because I did arts and cultural sciences. And then I did like a teacher's program for an English teacher thing. And that was not a good idea either. So I did that a lot, but I have no regrets because I loved it, and just being like, just learning and being around people. And they're so like with like adults, like 40, 50, 60 years old that are first years in your class as well, that just like, I'm studying here too, and international, and it's a lot different than just your local school. It's a very different group of people. Yeah, agreed. So, do you have any like final thoughts, any final things I forgot to ask or that you want to mention?
I'm doing a PhD about Tourette's. I could talk forever about it. I don't think there's anything in particular. I just think kind of in summary, like Tourette's is so unique, you know, it's so individual. So like try it, like particularly, even if you do have Tourette's, try and not just assume that like your experience of Tourette's is the same as other people's. Just like I'd encourage people without Tourette's to not assume that everybody with Tourette's has the same experience. I think that's like a really important thing to consider. And yeah, like I definitely would recommend, like, even if you don't know anyone with Tourette's, like I don't want to say like it's really common, but like you'd be surprised how many people you've probably met who have Tourette's. So like I would encourage you to kind of like learn about it, even just like the basics, you know, and kind of move past that that understanding of Tourette's as the swearing disorder or whatever it is people seem to say. But yeah, I think they're the kind of 2 points I would summarize with, I suppose.
Really cool. Yeah, agreed. Well, and I hope that if people are watching this that don't have Tourette's, that they are interested in learning about it, which I think it's so fascinating that people do that. I mean, I really like it, but I'm like, yay, you're actually watching this.
Yes, people are listening.
Yeah, you care. Thank you. Yeah.
So nice to see.
Thank you, Daniel, for being a part of this video, and thank you for watching this. Again, if you're new here, please subscribe. That really helps out a lot, and show Daniel some love in the comments below. I think he really deserves it. So if you agree, let him know, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.